The transport shuttle descended through the shimmering energy barrier surrounding the Celestial Institute, and Claire Hoffman pressed her face against the viewport. The academy stretched before her like a small city suspended in space, its crystalline towers catching the light of 3 distant suns. Docking bridges connected dozens of modules, each one dedicated to different aspects of military training. Ships from 100 worlds clustered around the station like moths around a flame. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her single travel bag. Every muscle in her body told her to turn back, to admit this was a mistake. But she had scored in the 99th percentile. The official letter bore the Academy's seal. She belonged here even if nobody else believed it yet. The shuttle doors hissed open and Claire stepped into the main reception hall. The ceiling soared 50 feet above her head, covered in holographic displays showing fleet movements and tactical exercises. Hundreds of cadets moved through the space with practiced confidence, their scales, fur, and chitin marking them as members of the Empire's most advanced species. A Theran cadet nearly twice Claire's height paused mid-stride to stare at her. His golden eyes narrowed with obvious confusion. Within seconds, the whispers began spreading through the hall like ripples across water. Is that a human? No way. They don't accept Deathworlders. Look how small she is. This has to be a mistake. Claire kept her eyes forward and made her way to the registration desk. The officer behind the counter, a being with purple skin and 4 arms, scanned her identification chip with visible skepticism. Claire Hoffman, the officer said slowly. Earth. Species classification. Category 7 Death World origin. He looked up from his screen. There must be an error in the system. No error, Claire replied quietly. I received my acceptance 6 weeks ago. The officer's 4 hands moved across multiple screens simultaneously. His expression shifted from confusion to shock. Your test scores are, these can't be right. They are right, Claire said. Wait here. The officer disappeared through a door behind the desk. Claire stood alone in the massive hall while hundreds of eyes tracked her every movement. A group of cadets wearing the crimson sashes of advanced students approached her. The leader, a Voshchan with blue crystalline skin, crossed his arms and smiled without warmth. You're the human everyone's talking about, he said. The one who supposedly scored higher than Prince Thale himself. I just took the exam like everyone else, Claire answered. Prince Thale comes from a bloodline of military geniuses spanning 3,000 years, the Voshchan continued. His species evolved for tactical thinking. What did your species evolve for? Running away from predators? The other cadets laughed. Claire said nothing. She had learned long ago that some battles were not worth fighting with words. The registration officer returned with a tall, imposing figure whose gray scales and battle scars marked him as Kralix. Commander Vashtor, the Academy's headmaster, studied Claire with eyes that had seen centuries of warfare. Follow me, he commanded. Claire walked behind him through corridors lined with holographic monuments to legendary graduates. Every face belonged to species she recognized from her studies. Therans, Voshchans, Silith warriors, Kralix commanders. Not a single human among them. Vashtor stopped outside a door marked Squad Epsilon. You've been assigned here, he said. His tone carried a weight Claire couldn't quite identify. Your squad mates are waiting inside. The door slid open to reveal 4 aliens in various states of dejection. A young Theran sat in the corner, his posture suggesting shame. A Voshchan female barely glanced up from her data pad. A Kralix male, younger than Vashtor but already scarred, stared at the wall. The smallest member, a Fleen with large eyes and trembling hands, jumped when Claire entered. This is your new squad mate, Vashtor announced. Claire Hoffman. From Earth. The Theran's head snapped up. A human? You're putting a primitive in our squad. He looked at Vashtor. We're already the worst performers in the Academy. This is an insult. Her test scores suggest otherwise, Krell, Vashtor replied. But we'll see soon enough. The commander left and uncomfortable silence filled the room. Claire set her bag on the only empty bunk and began unpacking her minimal belongings. I'm Zira, the Voshchan finally said, her voice flat. That's Krell, Jorik, and Pip. She gestured to each in turn. We're Squad Epsilon. Also known as the Failure Squad. The dumping ground for cadets who don't meet standards. Why are you here? Claire asked. Zira's crystalline features hardened. Because I questioned a superior's tactics during an exercise. Turns out being right doesn't matter if you embarrass someone important. She nodded toward Krell. He's a noble heir who failed his family's expectations. Jorik got injured and lost his combat edge. Pip is just too scared to function under pressure. I'm not scared, Pip squeaked, then immediately contradicted himself by flinching at his own voice. The next morning, Claire stood with her squad in the main training arena. 15 other squads assembled in perfect formation, their members moving with synchronized precision. Squad Epsilon clustered awkwardly, maintaining uneven spacing. Commander Vashtor's voice boomed across the arena. Today you'll complete the standard physical assessment. Gravity obstacle course. Each squad will be timed and ranked. Claire watched as Squad Alpha, led by the imposing Prince Thale, completed the course in under 3 minutes. Their movements flowed like water, each member supporting the others through enhanced strength and speed. The crowd of watching cadets erupted in cheers. Squad Epsilon, Vashtor called. You're next. Claire's squad stumbled through the course. Krell's shame made him hesitate. Zira moved with precision but no enthusiasm. Jorik favored his injured side. Pip froze completely at the high wall. Claire tried to help coordinate their movements, but the different gravity tolerances of each species created chaos. They finished in 8 minutes. Dead last by a significant margin. Prince Thale's voice carried across the arena. Perhaps the human needs to evolve for a few more million years before attempting military training. The laughter that followed made Pip whimper. Even Krell looked humiliated. Claire stood very still, her face carefully neutral. Commander Vashtor approached Squad Epsilon. His eyes settled on Claire with an expression somewhere between curiosity and disappointment. Cadet Hoffman, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I'm beginning to wonder if our admission standards have fallen. Perhaps political pressure led to unfortunate exceptions being made. Claire met his gaze directly. Sir, the physical assessment measures raw strength and standard gravity. It doesn't measure tactical thinking, adaptability, or strategic planning. Those qualities mean nothing without the physical capability to execute them, Vashtor replied. He turned to address the entire assembly. Remember this, all of you. The Academy accepts only the best. Anything less puts future soldiers at risk. As the squads dismissed, Claire returned to her quarters alone. She sat on her bunk and pulled out a small photograph from her bag. It showed Earth from orbit, blue and green and beautiful. The most dangerous classroom in the galaxy, her instructor had called it. The planet where everything tried to kill you, where survival meant learning to adapt faster than the threats evolved. Claire tucked the photo away and pulled up her data pad. She had 3 hours before the next session. 3 hours to study every squad's performance, to analyze their patterns, to identify their assumptions. The galaxy thought humans were weak. They would learn differently. But Claire wouldn't prove it through strength. She would prove it the way her species always had, through the one advantage evolution had given them that no other species possessed. The ability to see what others couldn't. To adapt when others remained rigid. To survive when survival seemed impossible. She began taking notes, her mind already working through possibilities the Academy's instructors would never predict. Squad Epsilon might be full of failures, but Claire suspected that just meant they had nothing left to lose. And people with nothing to lose could be very dangerous indeed. The tactical simulation chamber hummed with energy as Squad Epsilon filed in 3 days after their disastrous physical assessment. Claire studied the massive holographic display that dominated the center of the room. A fortress sat on high ground, defended by automated turrets and shield generators. Their assignment scrolled across the screen in glowing text. Breach the fortress and capture the command center within 30 minutes. Commander Vashtor stood at the observation platform above them, arms crossed. 14 other squads had already completed this exercise. The fastest time belonged to Squad Alpha at 12 minutes, achieved through overwhelming firepower and coordinated assault. Standard siege scenario, Krell muttered, examining the fortress defenses. We go in hard and fast. Use our heavy weapons to punch through the shields. We don't have heavy weapons, Zira pointed out. Squad Epsilon gets bottom-tier equipment, remember? Jorik flexed his clawed hands. Then we use close combat. I can still fight even with this injury. The turrets will cut us down before we get within 50 meters, Pip squeaked, his small frame trembling. Claire studied the simulation parameters in silence. The fortress design followed classical Theran military doctrine. Overlapping fields of fire. Redundant power systems. Multiple fallback positions. It was designed to withstand exactly the kind of frontal assault that every other squad had used. What if we don't attack the fortress at all? Claire said quietly. 4 pairs of alien eyes turned toward her. That's the assignment, Krell said with exaggerated patience. Breach the fortress. Capture the command center. Did the human not understand the basic instructions? Claire pointed at the holographic display. The simulation assumes we want to take the fortress. But the objective just says capture the command center. It doesn't specify how. What are you suggesting? Zira asked, her crystalline features reflecting genuine curiosity for the first time. The fortress is automated, Claire explained. No actual defenders inside, just AI-controlled systems. What if we make them think we're attacking from the east while we approach from the west? Better yet, what if we make them think we're not even here? Krell laughed. The sensors will detect us immediately. This isn't some primitive Earth game of hide and seek. The sensors detect what they're programmed to detect, Claire continued. Energy signatures, movement patterns, heat signatures. But what if we give them exactly what they expect to see somewhere else? Pip's large eyes widened. You want to create decoys? Not just decoys, Claire said. I want to feed the defense systems false data. Make them see a massive assault force approaching from multiple directions. While the automated defenses engage those phantom targets, we go silent. No active equipment. No energy signatures. We move during the confusion. That's insane, Jorik growled. Without active equipment, we'll be defenseless. We'll be invisible, Claire corrected. The human military learned centuries ago that sometimes the best weapon is not being seen at all. Zira's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. The simulation parameters don't explicitly forbid electronic warfare. We could use our basic communication equipment to broadcast false signatures. This will never work, Krell declared. Commander Vashtor will see through it immediately. Claire met his golden eyes. Then we finish last again. What do we have to lose? The question hung in the air. Krell's shoulders slumped slightly. He was right about one thing, Squad Epsilon had nowhere to go but up. Fine, he said finally. But when this fails, I'm putting it in my report that I oppose the plan. The simulation began. Claire's fingers moved across her equipment interface, programming their communication devices to emit false energy signatures. Pip, despite his nervousness, proved surprisingly skilled at manipulating the basic code. Within 90 seconds, they had created the electronic ghosts of 15 phantom soldiers. Release them, Claire ordered. The false signatures scattered across the simulation terrain, approaching the fortress from 3 different directions. Immediately, the automated defenses responded. Turrets swiveled and fired at empty air. Shield generators redirected power to the threatened sectors. Alert systems blared warnings about incoming assault forces. Now we move, Claire whispered. All equipment to passive mode. No transmissions. No active scans. Stay low and move during the weapons fire. Squad Epsilon advanced in complete silence. The fortress's sensors swept past them repeatedly, but detected nothing. All the defensive systems remained focused on the phantom threats that seemed to multiply with each passing second. They reached the fortress's western wall unopposed. Claire examined the barrier and found exactly what she expected. Minimal defenses on this side because all the automated systems assumed attackers would never reach it undetected. Pip, can you override the door mechanism manually? Claire asked. The small Fleen pulled out a basic toolkit and began working. His hands shook, but his technical knowledge was solid. The door slid open with barely a whisper. Inside the fortress, Squad Epsilon moved like shadows. The command center lay 3 levels down. Claire led them through maintenance corridors that the simulation designers probably never expected anyone to use. No dramatic firefights. No heroic charges. Just patient, silent movement through the blind spots of an automated defense grid designed to repel conventional attacks. They reached the command center in 11 minutes. The objective marker flashed green as Zira accessed the central terminal. Above them in the observation deck, Commander Vashtor leaned forward sharply. Other instructors rushed to their monitoring stations, checking equipment readouts. Perfect stealth approach, one instructor muttered. 0 defensive engagement. 0 casualties. This can't be right. Check the simulation systems, Vashtor ordered. Equipment malfunction. It has to be. Squad Epsilon emerged from the simulation chamber to find a crowd of instructors surrounding the control panels. Prince Thale and Squad Alpha watched from across the room, their expressions a mixture of confusion and suspicion. Impossible, Thale declared loudly. They must have cheated somehow. Found an exploit in the code. Commander Vashtor's eyes locked on Claire. Explain what you did, Cadet Hoffman. Claire described their approach in simple terms. Electronic warfare. False signatures. Passive movement. exploiting the assumptions built into automated defense systems. As she spoke, Vashtor's expression shifted from suspicion to something more complex. "We're running it again," he announced. "New parameters. I'm personally redesigning the scenario. Let's see if this was luck or actual tactical thinking." The second simulation loaded 15 minutes later. Vashtor had changed everything. Different terrain. Mobile defenders instead of automated systems. Multiple objectives scattered across the battlefield. Variable weather conditions. It was designed to make their previous approach completely useless. Claire studied the new scenario for exactly 45 seconds. Then she smiled slightly. "Pip, how good are you with environmental systems?" she asked. "Pretty good," the Fleen admitted. "Why?" "Because those mobile defenders need to breathe, and weather conditions can be manipulated." "Zira, you studied Theran military psychology, right? What do they do when visibility drops?" "They consolidate into defensive positions," Zira answered, understanding dawning in her crystalline features. "They rely on sensor networks to maintain awareness." "Which we can jam with the same technique we just used," Claire finished. "Krell, you know noble combat doctrine. If we create chaos in their command structure, how will they respond?" Krell stared at her. For the first time since Claire had met him, she saw respect in his golden eyes. "They'll revert to individual unit tactics. Breaking their coordination." "Exactly." Claire turned to Jorik. "And that's when we need your close combat skills. Not to breach defenses, but to create pressure at specific points that force them to spread their forces thin." The second simulation began. This time, Squad Epsilon used the weather simulation against the defenders, creating a fog bank that disrupted sensors. They jammed communications, creating isolated pockets of defenders who couldn't coordinate. They struck at command elements, then faded away before reinforcements arrived. Every time Vashtor's redesigned scenario presented a new challenge, Claire adapted the approach in real time. The simulation AI began processing variables it was never designed to handle. Psychological pressure on simulated defenders. Environmental manipulation combined with electronic warfare. Attacks that targeted morale rather than physical positions. Tactics that created confusion rather than seeking direct confrontation. Squad Epsilon captured all objectives in 18 minutes. The simulation AI flagged 14 separate instances where the defenders made decisions that fell outside normal tactical parameters, all of them responses to psychological pressure Claire had deliberately created. In the observation deck, Vashtor pulled up Claire's admission test results on his private terminal. He had reviewed thousands of test scores over his centuries at the academy. He understood what normal looked like, even for genuinely exceptional cadets. Claire Hoffman's results weren't just high. They were unprecedented. Perfect scores in pattern recognition. Near-perfect scores in adaptive thinking. Questions designed to test unconventional problem-solving that most cadets left blank. She had answered them all correctly and then provided alternative solutions the test designers hadn't considered. Vashtor looked down at the human cadet who stood calmly while her squad mates celebrated their impossible victory. She wasn't physically imposing. She didn't have enhanced strength or speed. Her species' technology lagged centuries behind the Empire's standard. But she saw patterns that others missed. She adapted to new situations instantly. She understood that warfare wasn't just about strength, it was about making your opponent fight the wrong battle. For the first time in decades, Commander Vashtor felt something he rarely experienced: uncertainty about what he thought he knew. Below, Prince Thale's voice cut through the celebration. "Lucky twice. Let's see how the human performs in the field where luck runs out and reality matters." Claire heard the challenge. She said nothing, but Vashtor saw her eyes. They held no fear. No doubt. Just the calm assessment of someone calculating her next 20 moves while everyone else struggled with their current position. The galaxy had never accepted a human into the Celestial Institute before. Vashtor was beginning to understand why that might have been a mistake. Not because humans were too weak to attend, but because everyone had underestimated what true adaptation looked like. The transport dropped Squad Epsilon on the surface of Nera 5, a moon whose atmosphere tasted like rust and decay. Claire checked her environmental suit seals one final time before stepping onto the pale orange soil. The toxic marshes stretched to the horizon, pools of chemical sludge bubbling between twisted rock formations that looked like broken teeth. "Mission parameters are simple," Commander Vashtor's voice crackled through their helmet communicators. "Retrieve 3 beacons scattered across the marsh. Return to the extraction point within 6 hours. The Shrike beasts hunt by electromagnetic signatures, so keep your equipment powered and your shields active at all times." Claire looked at the mission briefing on her wrist display. Shrike beasts were apex predators native to Nera 5. 4 meters tall with razor-sharp claws and sensory organs that detected even the smallest energy emissions. They hunted in packs and had never been successfully avoided by Academy cadets using standard protocols. "Stay tight formation," Krell ordered, taking command as squad leader. "Keep shields at maximum. The beasts can't penetrate military-grade barriers." Squad Alpha landed 300 meters to their east. Prince Thal's voice boomed across the communication channel. "Try to keep up, Epsilon. We'll show you how real soldiers complete field exercises." His squad moved out in perfect formation, their shield generators creating a shimmering bubble of protection. Heavy weapons ready. Sensors sweeping the terrain in all directions. Every piece of equipment running at full power. Claire watched them go with growing unease. "We should power down," she said quietly. "What?" Jorik growled. "Did you not hear the briefing? The beasts hunt electromagnetic signatures. Our shields are the only thing keeping us alive." "Exactly," Claire replied. "They hunt EM signatures. Squad Alpha is broadcasting their location like a beacon. Every Shrike beast within 10 kilometers knows exactly where they are." Zira's crystalline face reflected understanding. "You want us to go dark? Make ourselves invisible to their senses." "The humans lost her mind," Krell declared. "Without shields, one beast could kill us all. With shields, we're guaranteed to attract every beast in the area," Claire countered. She knelt and scooped up a handful of the orange soil. "This moon has sulfur compounds in the ground. Shrike beasts are ambush predators. They avoid areas with strong chemical markers because it masks their own scent trails." Pip's large eyes widened with terror. "You want us to cover ourselves in toxic chemicals and walk through a predator-filled marsh with no protection?" "I want us to think like prey that survives," Claire said. She began examining her suit's external layer. "We coat our suits in the local minerals. We power down everything except basic life support. We move during their inactive periods." "There are no inactive periods in the briefing," Krell protested. Claire pulled up biological data on her wrist display. "Because nobody studies prey behavior. They only study predator attack patterns. But every predator has vulnerabilities. Shrike beasts have a mating cycle that peaks every 8 hours. During peak mating activity they're focused on each other, not hunting." "How could you possibly know that?" Zira asked. "I read the full ecological survey last night instead of sleeping," Claire answered. "The information was in the Academy database. Most cadets just read the tactical briefing." Squad Epsilon stood in silence. The decision hung between them like the toxic mist rising from the marshes. Finally, Krell sighed. "We're already the worst squad in Academy history. Might as well try something insane." He began shutting down his equipment. They coated their suits in the sulfur-rich soil until the white Academy uniforms turned orange-brown. Claire calculated the timing of the Shrike beast mating cycle and identified a 2-hour window. They moved in complete silence, no active sensors, no communication beyond hand signals. The marshes were eerily quiet. In the distance, they could hear weapons fire and the screeching roars of Shrike beasts. Squad Alpha was engaged in combat. Claire led her team in the opposite direction, navigating by the position of Nera 5's primary star and landmarks she had memorized from orbital scans. They retrieved the first beacon without incident. The second beacon sat near a cluster of twisted rock formations. Claire approached it carefully, reading the landscape the way her instructors had taught her to read tactical maps. The ground showed claw marks. Recent ones. She signaled her squad to stop and wait. 30 seconds later, a Shrike beast emerged from behind the rocks, its sensory organs sweeping the area. The creature moved within 5 meters of Squad Epsilon. Claire barely breathed. The beast's organs twitched, searching for electromagnetic signatures that weren't there. After a long moment it moved on. Pip grabbed the beacon with shaking hands. They had 2 of 3. That's when the communication channel exploded with panic. "All squads, emergency extraction," an instructor's voice shouted. "Squad Alpha has triggered a Shrike beast nest. Multiple casualties. We're pulling everyone out now." Claire's mind raced. Squad Alpha's position was 2 kilometers northeast. The extraction point was 3 kilometers south. They could reach safety easily. She looked at her squad mates. Krell met her eyes. He knew what she was thinking. "We're not rescue specialists," he said. "They'll die," Claire replied simply. "They laughed at us. Called us failures. Prince Thale said humans were primitive." Krell's voice held all the bitterness of his family's disappointment in him. "I know," Claire said. But they're still cadets. Like us. Zira checked her equipment. We have no shields. No heavy weapons. We're covered in dirt and running on minimal power. How exactly do we rescue Squad Alpha from a nest of apex predators? Claire was already moving northeast. Fire, she said. Shrike beasts evolved in these marshes. Their sensory organs are incredibly sensitive to heat signatures because thermal changes signal prey. But they've never encountered actual flame. It's not part of their evolutionary environment. We don't have incendiary weapons, Jorik pointed out. We have emergency flares, Claire said. And this entire marsh is full of chemical compounds. Some of them are flammable. Pip, can you identify which pools will ignite? The small flean pulled up chemical analysis data. Yes, but the smoke will be toxic even through our filters. We won't be staying long enough for it to matter, Claire replied. They approached Squad Alpha's position at a dead run. Prince Thale's squad had formed a defensive circle, shields flickering and failing. 6 Shrike beasts circled them, with more emerging from underground burrows. The beasts were massive up close, their claws capable of shearing through armor plating. Claire assessed 17 different variables in the span of 3 seconds. Wind direction. Chemical pool locations. Beast positioning. Squad Alpha's remaining power levels. Terrain features. Escape routes. The Shrike beasts' attack patterns. Their sensory organ orientations. The time until rescue ships could arrive. Her own squad's capabilities and limitations. Pip, ignite the pools in sequence, east to west, she commanded. Zira broadcast a false EM signature north to split their attention. Krell, when they turn, grab Squad Alpha's wounded. Jorik, you're with me. We're creating a corridor. Her squad moved without hesitation. The trust they had built over 3 impossible victories held firm. Pip's flares hit the chemical pools. Flames erupted in colors that didn't exist naturally, blue and green and purple fire that roared into the toxic sky. The Shrike beasts shrieked and recoiled. Their sensory organs had never processed anything like this. Zira's false signature drew 3 beasts away from the circle. Claire and Jorik threw more flares, creating a wall of flame between the remaining beasts and Squad Alpha. The creatures backed away, their evolutionary programming screaming warnings about this unknown danger. Move now, Claire shouted. Krell hauled 2 injured cadets over his shoulders. Squad Alpha stumbled through the corridor of flame, their expensive equipment sparking and failing. Prince Thale stared at Claire with an expression somewhere between shock and humiliation. The rescue ships arrived 4 minutes later. Medical teams swarmed the wounded cadets. Claire's squad stood apart, their suits still covered in orange dirt, their equipment barely functional. Commander Vashtor descended from the lead ship. His eyes moved from Squad Alpha's battered formation to Squad Epsilon's exhausted but unharmed members. Medical scan all cadets, he ordered. Now. The scanners revealed what everyone expected from Squad Alpha. Minor injuries, shock, elevated stress hormones. Then they scanned Claire. The medical officer stared at her readings. Commander, you need to see this. Vashtor examined the data. During the rescue operation, Claire's brain activity had spiked to levels the scanner flagged as equipment error. Synaptic firing patterns that exceeded documented norms for any known species. Her neural processing had tracked and calculated 17 simultaneous variables while running at full speed through toxic terrain. Explain this, Vashtor demanded. Claire removed her helmet. Her face was streaked with sweat and dirt. You want to know why a human could do what your elite cadets couldn't? Yes. Claire gestured at the marsh around them. Every species here evolved on worlds with 1 or 2 apex predators. Maybe 3. Your tactics, your instincts, your neural architecture. All of it developed to handle specific threats in controlled environments. She met Vashtor's eyes. Earth doesn't have 1 apex predator. We survived them all. Predators in the water. Predators in the air. Predators that hunted in packs. Predators that hunted alone. Predators that could smell us from kilometers away. Predators that could hear our heartbeats. That's impossible, Prince Thale said weakly from his medical stretcher. No species could survive that. We didn't just survive it, Claire continued. We thrived in it. We learned to track multiple threats simultaneously because we had to. We learned to adapt instantly because hesitation meant death. We learned to use tools, fire, coordination, psychology, anything that gave us an edge. Our brains didn't evolve to be stronger or faster. They evolved to process chaos and find patterns in it. Vashtor looked at the data again. The numbers didn't lie. Claire's neural activity during crisis situations operated at levels that should have been biologically impossible. Earth doesn't have one apex predator, Claire repeated quietly, because we killed them all, and learned from each one we faced. The medical bay fell silent except for the hiss of air recyclers. Squad Alpha's members stared at the small human who had just saved their lives using nothing but dirt, fire, and a brain that processed threats faster than their military-grade computers. Prince Thale finally spoke. "Thank you," he said. The words seemed to physically pain him, but he said them anyway. Claire nodded once. Then she turned to her squad. "Let's get cleaned up. We still have training tomorrow." As Squad Epsilon walked away, Vashtor made a note in his personal log. The galaxy had spent millennia assuming that Deathworld species were too primitive, too violent, too chaotic for civilized military service. But watching Claire Hoffman coordinate a rescue operation that professional soldiers would have considered suicidal, he realized the mistake wasn't in accepting humans to the academy. The mistake was waiting this long to do it. Commander Vashtor stood before the assembled cadets in the main briefing hall, his ancient eyes scanning the crowd. Behind him, a holographic display showed a colony settlement surrounded by hostile fleet positions. The image had haunted academy students for 8 centuries. "The Crucible," Vashtor announced, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "For 800 years, this simulation has taught our finest cadets the most important lesson in warfare: knowing when you cannot win." Claire sat with Squad Epsilon in the back row. Around them, other squads whispered nervously. Everyone knew about the Crucible. It appeared in third-year curriculum as a final test of judgment and wisdom. "The scenario is simple," Vashtor continued. "You command a colony of 10,000 civilians. An enemy fleet of superior force surrounds your position. You have no reinforcements, no escape routes, limited supplies, outdated defensive systems. Every cadet who has faced this scenario has surrendered within 6 hours. The lesson is clear: a commander must know when continued resistance means pointless death." Prince Thale raised his hand. "Has anyone ever won, Commander?" "No," Vashtor replied. "Because winning is impossible. That is the point." His eyes found Claire in the crowd. "However, I'm modifying the parameters this year. Squad Epsilon will face the Crucible as a team exercise. They have 12 hours instead of 6. Shocked murmurs filled the hall. Squad Epsilon looked at each other with confusion and growing dread. 12 hours to do what? Krell asked quietly. 12 hours to learn that some battles cannot be won, Vashtor answered. Dismissed. The simulation chamber felt different when Claire entered it the next morning. The usual tactical displays had been replaced by a massive holographic projection of the doomed colony. Residential sectors. Hospital complexes. Schools. 10,000 simulated civilians going about their lives, unaware that their fate had been sealed before the exercise even began. Squad Epsilon gathered around the command console. The enemy fleet specifications scrolled across the screen. 30 warships. Advanced weapon systems. Planetary bombardment capabilities. Troop transport capacity for ground invasion. "This is sick," Pip whispered. "They want us to watch simulated people die to teach us about accepting defeat? They want us to learn that sacrifice without purpose is foolish," Zira said, though her voice carried doubt. Claire studied the scenario parameters in silence. She pulled up historical records of previous attempts. Every single cadet had followed the same basic pattern. Shore up defenses, attempt diplomatic contact, fight until resistance became clearly futile, then surrender to save civilian lives. "What are you thinking?" Jorik asked, recognizing the expression Claire wore when she was analyzing problems. "I'm thinking this scenario was designed by people who assume warfare has rules," Claire replied. "It gives us 12 hours before orbital bombardment begins." "Why 12 hours?" "To give us time to realize resistance is futile," Krell answered. "No," Claire said. 12 hours serves no military purpose for the enemy. If they wanted the colony destroyed, they'd strike immediately. If they wanted it captured intact, they'd negotiate. 12 hours means they're waiting for something. The scenario doesn't include enemy motivations, Zira pointed out. It's designed to be unsolvable regardless of their goals. Claire smiled slightly. Then we give them motivations. We create a story they have to respond to. "I don't understand," Pip said. "The simulation AI controls the enemy fleet," Claire explained. "It responds to our actions based on military logic and tactical doctrine. But what if we do things that fall outside military logic? What if we make this not about winning a battle but about making them not want to fight?" She pulled up the colony's communication systems. First, we broadcast a distress signal that's obviously fake. We make it too perfect, too rehearsed. The kind of signal that screams, trap. Why would we want them to think it's a trap? Jorik asked. Because suspicious enemies hesitate, Claire replied. They wait. They gather intelligence. They waste time trying to figure out what we're really planning. That buys us maybe an hour, Krell said. Then what? Claire's fingers moved across the console. Then we start the real work. Pip, I need you to create false sensor readings. Make it look like we have advanced weapon systems we're trying to hide. Nothing that would actually threaten their fleet, but enough to make them recalculate their assault plans. I can do that, Pip said, his fear replaced by technical curiosity. Zira, you understand Voshchan psychology better than anyone. I need you to craft propaganda broadcast. Not aimed at the enemy fleet but at their home populations. Messages about the cost of this invasion. About the civilians they're about to kill. Make it emotional. Make it spread doubt. Zira's crystalline features brightened. Information warfare. Make the political cost higher than the military gain. Exactly, Claire confirmed. Krell, you know noble protocols and diplomatic channels. I need you to create confusion in their command structure. Send conflicting surrender offers through different channels. Make them argue among themselves about terms. Krell paused. That's actually brilliant. Noble fleets have complex chains of command. If we can make different commanders think they're negotiating different deals, they'll start fighting each other for credit and positioning, Claire finished. Which brings us to Jorik. I need you to stage a medical crisis. The Kralix warrior looked confused. What kind of medical crisis? A disease outbreak, Claire said calmly. We broadcast medical emergencies from the colony. A plague. Highly contagious. Probably started by biological weapons their own advanced scouts deployed. We make them afraid that capturing the colony means bringing a deadly infection back to their ships. The simulation began. Squad Epsilon worked with coordinated precision that would have seemed impossible weeks ago. Pip's false sensor readings suggested the colony possessed experimental shield technology. The enemy fleet's assault plans shifted immediately, moving ships into positions designed to counter defenses that didn't actually exist. Zira's propaganda broadcasts spread through simulated communication networks. Within 2 hours, the AI generated civilian unrest in the enemy's home territory. Political pressure began building against the invasion. Krell sent 7 different surrender offers through 7 different diplomatic channels. Each one contained slightly different terms. The enemy fleet's unified command structure fractured as different admirals argued over which offer to accept and who would receive credit for the victory. Jorik's medical emergency broadcasts were masterfully crafted. Claire had researched biological warfare doctrine across 15 species. She knew exactly which symptoms to report that would trigger quarantine protocols and fear of contamination. The simulation AI began processing variables it was never designed to handle. Psychological warfare. Propaganda effects on distant populations. Diplomatic protocols being weaponized against command structure. Medical fears overriding tactical objectives. Political considerations trumping military efficiency. At hour 4, the enemy fleet still hadn't attacked. They were arguing. Repositioning. Demanding clarification. Waiting for intelligence reports that would never come because the threats weren't real. At hour 6, the first enemy ships broke formation. 3 vessels returned to their home territory, their commanders convinced the invasion had become politically untenable. At hour 8, the simulation AI flagged an error. The scenario was designed to force surrender by demonstrating hopelessness. But hope was increasing, not decreasing. Civilian morale in the colony was rising as they watched the enemy fleet's cohesion collapse. At hour 10, the enemy fleet received simulated orders from their home government to withdraw pending investigation of the biological weapon claims. The political cost of the invasion had exceeded acceptable parameters. At hour 12, the simulation crashed. The holographic displays flickered and died. Error messages scrolled across every screen. The AI had encountered a scenario it couldn't process. The unsolvable problem had been solved without firing a single shot. Commander Vashtor stared at the dead screens in the observation room. Around him, instructors frantically tried to restore the simulation systems. What happened? An instructor demanded. The AI couldn't handle the strategic variables, another replied, reading error logs. Psychological warfare combined with diplomatic manipulation combined with biological threat assessment combined with political pressure simulation. It tried to calculate optimal enemy responses and, The processing load exceeded parameters. Vashtor descended to the simulation chamber. Squad Epsilon stood around their console, looking uncertain whether they had succeeded or failed. "Explain," Vashtor commanded. "Every step of your strategy." Claire walked him through their approach. False signals. Propaganda. Diplomatic confusion. Manufactured medical crisis. Each element designed not to win a military victory but to make the enemy choose not to fight. "You didn't try to defend the colony," Vashtor said slowly. "No, sir," Claire confirmed. "We tried to make defending it unnecessary. You said winning was impossible. But you defined winning as surviving a military engagement. We changed the definition." Prince Thale stepped forward from the crowd of watching cadets. "She cheated. The scenario is about knowing when to surrender with honor. She exploited loopholes in the AI. I used every tool available," Claire corrected. "The scenario gave us 12 hours. Communication systems. Sensor capabilities. Medical facilities. Diplomatic channels. Why give us those tools if we're only supposed to use them for conventional defense?" Vashtor was silent for a long moment. He had designed the Crucible himself, centuries ago, after watching too many young commanders throw away lives in unwinnable situations. The lesson had always been about acceptance. About wisdom through limitation. But Claire had asked a question he had never considered. Why did warfare have to follow expected patterns? "How did you know this would work?" he asked quietly. Claire met his eyes. "Because human warfare didn't evolve fighting aliens with different biology and psychology. It evolved fighting other humans. Enemies who thought like us. Who adapted as fast as we did. Who learned from the same battles we learned from. We couldn't rely on being stronger or faster or having better technology because our enemies would match those advantages within a generation." She gestured at the dead simulation screens. "So we learned to fight battles that weren't about strength. We learned to make enemies fight each other. To create doubt. To attack will and morale instead of bodies. To turn political systems against military objectives. We spent 10,000 years in an arms race against our own ingenuity." Vashtor understood then. The galaxy's military doctrine had developed through warfare between species with different capabilities. Theron strength versus Vostian tactical processing. Kralix endurance versus Silith speed. Wars where advantages remained relatively stable across generations. But humans had fought only themselves. Every tactical innovation was immediately countered by an enemy who understood it because they thought the same way. Warfare had become an endless cycle of adaptation and counter-adaptation. "The Crucible is supposed to teach acceptance of defeat," Vashtor said. "It taught us to question what defeat means," Claire replied. The commander looked at his instructors. At Prince Thale. At the hundreds of cadets who had learned that some problems had no solution. "The simulation will be redesigned," he announced. "To account for unconventional strategic variables. Squad Epsilon's approach will be studied and integrated into tactical curriculum." He turned to Claire. "And you will help design the new parameters." "Sir?" Claire asked, surprised. "If human warfare evolved through constant adaptation against equal intelligence, then you understand something we don't. How to fight enemies who learn as fast as you do. That is a lesson this academy needs." As the cadets filed out, Krell put a hand on Claire's shoulder. "You know what you just did? You didn't just beat an unsolvable scenario. You changed 800 years of academy doctrine." Claire shrugged slightly. "I just asked what would happen if we didn't play by the expected rules." "That's exactly what makes you terrifying," Zira said with something that might have been a smile. "You don't even realize how differently you think." Squad Epsilon walked together through the academy corridors. Around them, other cadets stared with expressions ranging from respect to fear to confusion. The failure squad had done the impossible 3 times now. But Claire knew they weren't finished yet. Prince Thale's humiliation was complete, and humiliated nobles were dangerous. The real test was still coming. The Academy Council chamber felt cold despite the environmental controls maintaining perfect temperature. Claire stood in the center of the circular room while 12 senior commanders occupied elevated seats around her. Commander Vashtor sat at the highest position, his ancient face unreadable. "The matter before this council is unprecedented," announced Admiral Thekvar, a Vostian whose crystalline body reflected the chamber's lights. "Cadet Claire Hoffman has demonstrated abilities that fall outside established parameters for academy training. The question is whether she represents an asset or a liability." "She's too dangerous," declared Commander Silrath, a Silith whose scales rippled with agitation. "She thinks in ways our tactical systems can't predict. She exploits weaknesses we didn't know existed. What happens when she graduates and commands actual fleets? How do we control someone who doesn't follow conventional military logic? Control? Vashtor's voice cut through the discussion. We don't train cadets to be controlled. We train them to think. There's a difference between independent thinking and dismantling centuries of proven doctrine, Admiral Thekvar countered. Cadet Hoffman has broken 3 supposedly unbeatable scenarios. She's made our best simulation systems look primitive. Other cadets are beginning to question whether traditional training has any value. Claire remained silent, hands clasped behind her back. She had been standing for 40 minutes while the council debated her fate. Her legs ached, but she kept her posture straight. "May I speak?" she asked quietly. The council members exchanged glances. Admiral Thekvar nodded. "I haven't broken your doctrine," Claire said. "I've just approached problems from different angles. Everything I've done used standard academy equipment and followed established rules. I just questioned assumptions about how those rules should be applied." "Questioning assumptions is how chaos begins," Commander Silrath hissed. "Questioning assumptions is how my species survived," Claire replied. "Earth had no unified government when we developed space travel. No single military doctrine. We had hundreds of different approaches to warfare, all competing and evolving. The tactics that survived weren't the strongest or most traditional. They were the ones that adapted fastest." Before the council could respond, the chamber doors opened. Prince Thale entered without permission, his golden armor gleaming. Behind him stood his father, High Lord Thale Vorin, one of the most powerful nobles in the Theran Imperium. "This council is in closed session," Vashtor said sharply. "My son invokes ancient privilege," High Lord Thale Vorin declared. "The right of challenge. Cadet Hoffman has humiliated House Thale through superior performance. This stain on our honor cannot stand." The council chamber fell silent. The right of challenge was ancient law, predating the academy itself. It allowed nobles who felt dishonored by commoners to demand sanctioned combat. "This is absurd," Admiral Thekvar protested. "The cadets simply performed well in training exercises." "She made my son appear incompetent," High Lord Thale Vorin said coldly. "She rescued him when he should have succeeded. She solved problems he could not. Every time she exceeds him, she suggests that noble bloodlines are inferior to Death World primitives. This cannot be tolerated." Prince Thale stepped forward. "I challenge Claire Hoffman to sanctioned combat. Non-lethal terms. First to yield or first to unconsciousness." Claire's mind raced. She had studied the right of challenge during her research on academy protocols. Refusing meant automatic expulsion and permanent dishonor. Accepting meant fighting an opponent who had trained in combat since childhood, whose species possessed 3 times her strength and twice her reach. "I accept," Claire said calmly. "But I propose modified terms. Environmental combat. We fight in the training complex with full terrain variables. No restrictions on tactics or equipment usage within non-lethal parameters." Prince Thale smiled without warmth. "Agreed. Tomorrow. Dawn cycle." The arena filled with cadets and instructors as word of the challenge spread. Claire stood in her section of the environmental combat complex, a massive chamber that could simulate any terrain type. She wore standard training armor and carried no weapons. Across the arena, Prince Thale stood in full noble combat gear. His armor enhanced his already superior strength. Combat blades extended from his forearm guards. He looked like a warrior from ancient legends. Commander Vashtor's voice echoed through the chamber. "Sanctioned combat under the right of challenge. Non-lethal terms. Environmental variables active. Fight concludes with first yield or unconsciousness. Begin." The terrain shifted. Platforms rose and fell. Obstacles appeared and disappeared. The environment became a constantly changing battlefield. Prince Thale charged immediately, using his superior speed to close the distance. His blade swept toward Claire's midsection. She dropped and rolled, letting his momentum carry him past her. The blade cut only air. He turned and attacked again. Claire didn't try to block or parry. She simply wasn't there when his strikes landed. She moved constantly, using obstacles and terrain changes to stay just beyond his reach. "Stop running and fight," Thale roared. "I am fighting," Claire replied calmly. She led him toward a section where platforms rose and fell in irregular patterns. Thale followed, his pride demanding he catch this seemingly helpless opponent. Claire timed her movements perfectly, stepping onto platforms just as they rose, forcing Thale to adjust his attacks mid-strike. Each adjustment wasted energy. Each missed attack added to his frustration. Claire studied his patterns. Theron combat doctrine emphasized overwhelming force and direct engagement. Thale had been trained to dominate through superior strength. But strength meant nothing if it couldn't connect with its target. The fight continued for 12 minutes. Thale's breathing grew heavier. His armor's enhanced strength had cost him endurance. Claire had barely broken a sweat. She shifted tactics. Instead of pure evasion, she began redirecting his attacks. When he swung high, she ducked and pushed his arm further in that direction, using his own momentum to throw him off balance. When he charged, she sidestepped and guided him into obstacles. Thale's perfect form began to deteriorate. His attacks grew wild, desperate. He was defeating himself and he knew it, which made him angrier and sloppier. Claire waited for the right moment. Thale overextended on a downward strike. She stepped inside his guard, used his forward momentum against him and swept his legs. The prince crashed to the ground, his heavy armor making the impact worse. Before he could rise, Claire placed her foot lightly on his chest. Not pinning him with strength, but positioned so that any attempt to stand would require him to push her off, which would waste more energy than he had left. "Yield," she said quietly. "There's no shame in it." Thale's golden eyes burned with fury and humiliation. Around them, hundreds of cadets watched in absolute silence. Claire removed her foot and stepped back. Then she extended her hand. Thale stared at the offered hand. Every instinct in his noble training screamed at him to refuse help from someone he considered inferior. But something in Claire's expression stopped him. Not pity. Not mockery. Just calm acknowledgement of what had happened. He took her hand. She helped him to his feet. "You didn't beat me with strength," Thale said, breathing hard. "You made me beat myself." "That's what adaptation means," Claire replied. "Finding the way to win that plays to your advantages, not your opponent's expectations." The arena erupted in noise. Some cadets cheered. Others argued. The council members in the observation deck leaned forward with intense interest. Commander Vashtor descended to the arena floor. "The challenge is concluded. Cadet Hoffman is victorious." He looked at both fighters. "You both demonstrated important lessons today." Prince Thale showed the courage to face an opponent who had already defeated him intellectually. Cadet Hoffman showed that warfare is not about overpowering enemies, but about understanding them. High Lord Thalvorin stood in the observation deck, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he nodded once. It was the smallest possible acknowledgement, but from a Theron noble, it meant acceptance. 3 weeks later, Claire stood before the assembled academy in the main hall. Commander Vashtor addressed the crowd while Squad Epsilon stood behind him in full dress uniform. "The Academy Council has reached a decision regarding Cadet Hoffman and her unconventional approaches," Vashtor announced. "Effective immediately, she will assist in redesigning tactical curriculum to include adaptive warfare doctrine. Her methods will be studied and taught to future generations of officers." He paused, his ancient eyes scanning the crowd. "Additionally, Squad Epsilon has been reclassified from lowest to highest performance ranking. They will graduate at the top of their class." The hall filled with applause mixed with shocked whispers. Krell stood straighter, his shame finally replaced by pride. Zira's crystalline features glowed with satisfaction. Jorik's scars seemed less prominent somehow. Pip no longer trembled. After the ceremony, Claire was assigned to address the incoming class of new cadets. She stood at the podium looking out at hundreds of young faces from dozens of species. They stared at her with curiosity and uncertainty. "Most of you are wondering how a human ended up teaching at the galaxy's most prestigious military academy," Claire began. "You're wondering what I could possibly teach you that your own species' traditions haven't already covered." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I can teach you that normal is what you make of it. Every species here evolved with certain advantages. Therans have strength. Vostians have processing speed. Kraliks have endurance. Silith have reflexes. You were all taught that warfare means using your advantages to overcome opponents' weaknesses." Claire stepped away from the podium, her voice growing stronger. "But what happens when you face enemies who adapt as fast as you do? Who learn from every battle? Who turn your own advantages into vulnerabilities? That's what human warfare taught us. We spent thousands of years fighting opponents who thought exactly like us. We couldn't rely on being stronger or faster because our enemies would match those advantages within a generation." She looked at the young cadets, seeing the same uncertainty she had felt when she first arrived. "So we learned to adapt. To question assumptions. To see patterns others missed. To turn problems into opportunities. That's what I'm here to teach you. Not how to be human, but how to think like someone who survived because they never stopped learning. A young fleeing cadet raised a trembling hand. What if we're not smart enough? What if we can't think that way? Claire smiled. 3 months ago, I had a squad of cadets who were considered the worst performers in Academy history. A failed noble. A disgraced tactician. An injured warrior. A terrified engineer. They didn't think they could succeed either. She gestured to where Squad Epsilon stood at the back of the hall. Now they're graduating top of their class. Not because they became stronger or faster or smarter. Because they learned to use what they had in ways nobody expected. The hall was silent. Every cadet leaned forward, listening intently. You don't have to be the strongest to survive, Claire continued. You don't have to be the fastest or the smartest. You just have to be willing to adapt. To learn. To question whether the way things have always been done is the only way they can be done. She returned to the podium and looked out at the future of galactic military leadership. Normal is what you make of it, she repeated. The galaxy told me humans were too weak, too primitive, too different to succeed here. I'm standing at this podium teaching future commanders because I refuse to accept that definition of normal. Claire's voice softened but remained clear. So my question to all of you is, what's your definition going to be? The incoming cadets sat in thoughtful silence. Some looked inspired. Some looked challenged. All of them looked at the small human instructor with new understanding. As the assembly dismissed, Prince Thale approached Claire. The noble's expression had changed over the past weeks. The arrogance had been tempered by something that looked like respect. My father wants to meet with you, he said quietly. He's recommending that human tactical doctrine be studied by the Theran military academies. Claire raised her eyebrows. That's unexpected. You defeated me without humiliating me, Thale said. You offered me your hand when you could have savored victory. That's not primitive behavior. That's wisdom. He paused. I was wrong about humans. About you. We were all wrong about each other, Claire replied. That's why adaptation matters. Learning to see what we missed before. As Thale walked away, Commander Vashtor approached. The ancient commander looked at Claire with an expression she had never seen before, something almost like pride. You've changed this academy in 1 semester, he said. 800 years of tradition, questioned and improved by a cadet who wasn't supposed to be here. I just asked different questions, Claire said. No, Vashtor corrected. You showed us that the questions we weren't asking were the most important ones. He handed her a data pad. Your new curriculum proposal. The council approved it unanimously. Claire looked at the document. Her methods. Her approaches. Her questions. All of it would now be taught to every cadet who passed through the Celestial Institute. She thought about Earth, distant and dangerous and beautiful. The planet that had forged her species in fire and survival. The classroom that taught adaptation or death. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had always known. The most dangerous weapon wasn't strength or speed or technology. It was the refusal to accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. Normal was what you made of it. And Claire had just redefined normal for an entire galaxy.